Welcome to the Beauty Way podcast. And it is my pleasure to introduce today James Greenshields, a man that I know very well and who it is really an honor to be in relationship with and to invite into this space with Carissa and I. In our first episode, we were talking about conscious parenting, creative parenting, and we had a conversation about how our youth are being raised, how they're being impacted, and specifically we spoke about the homogenization of youth in the school system. And so you popped into my mind, James, as somebody who has a lot of knowledge and has also worked with a lot of young people over the years and is also the father of our two daughters. And together we've consciously parented very differently to how we were both raised. And I felt like it was a really great place for us to start and to come into conversation about conscious parenting with you, because I know you so well. I know how we've done things, and I felt like it could bring us some really interesting topics to talk about. So welcome, James.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be with such powerful women in this space. That's a deep honor. As you alluded to, our parenting style's chalk and cheese, realistically, to the way we were raised. And I love my parents dearly, and I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I had as a child. And obviously, my soul's choice needed to go into that paradigm. But by the age of 33, I realised I was an institutionalized moron. I had a father, Anglican priest, a farmer, chaplain to the Army, Police, Country Fire Authority, Vietnam veteran, post-traumatic stress. A farm was on the southern boundary of the largest military training area in Victoria, known as Puckapunyal. And mum had taught in the Roman Catholic school in the local town of Seymour for 36 years. So she was an English teacher, an RE teacher, and everything like this. And I hated English because no one taught me the essence of language and communication. I so now love understanding the etymology of words, what the genesis of the power of the words, where they come from, the energy behind them, and what they bring to the party. So I went to boarding school at the age of 14. I needed to because my dad and we could not be in the same room together. If I break that down, there's an amazing individual who just wanted the best for his son because he knew him so well and so deeply, loved him so much. And he saw the potential in him, but because of his own wounds, he kept trying to control this young man instead of step back and let the young man spread his own wings. And this young man just had such a love of his father that he just wanted his father to see him for who he was. So he was trying to prove himself constantly to his father. And so couldn't actually stop, take a breath, and actually be present with his dad to get as much wisdom as was on offer. And then because of my own sexuality issues, I became homophobic, even though my dad was my love role model. Probably boarding school had something to do with that as well. But the point is that I didn't understand my own sexuality, and being in the construct of religion, well, that didn't really give me any opportunity whatsoever to understand my sexuality. So it wasn't until crashing at the age of 33 with post-traumatic stress post a 17-year military career where I was an army officer that allowed me to completely die. And I needed to die because I was so busy being what everyone else wanted me to do and be. All my value was in my doing, not my being, and I was becoming a rigid, culturally intoxicated individual who realistically had closed his heart. And so I deployed to Iraq in charge of over 100 soldiers 10 months after my first daughter was born. And as a father, I didn't connect with her. Why? Couple of things. I was going to a war zone, and when I stepped on the plane, I actually wasn't due to come back. But mostly was because I was scared. I was scared shitless. And it was easy to be a combat officer and dodge bullets and bombs and pay out death than it was to open my heart to a little soul. And so when I came back, my soul was raw. I was hollow, and she was just there constantly, not judging, just wanting me to show up. So I probably didn't connect with her until she was 2.5, properly, deeply. She was such a guide to me because if I lost my shit in anger, her eyes became like dinner plates. and they were then my barometer. And if her eyes went wide, it meant that I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I was feeling. So I used them to exit stage left and go and own how I was feeling, deal with it appropriately, because by then I'd sought help. But she was my guide so much. Actually, I'm looking at a photo of her at that age right now.
She was
Um,
so cute.
oh, she was incredibly cute, blue-eyed. And then Penelope Jane came on, and like, funnily as a father, like I'm in military uniform. Kirsty's just gone through an incredible, intense experience over the last 24 hours. We've had to have an emergency cesarean. Kirsty's in recovery. I'm with Penelope. She's a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes. We're in the birthing suite, and I'm walking around like a cat in a hot tin roof in a military uniform. And like I'm just wanting a nurse to come in and give me permission to pick my daughter up. And Penelope just called to me and said, "It's okay, Dad, pick me up." And so I did. And we've bonded like from that moment on, like we bonded straight away. And at the age of 7, I looked Penelope in the eyes and I said, before I kissed her goodnight, I said, "Thank you so much for teaching me to live with an open heart." And it's been an ongoing lesson that I've been learning from my daughters. But as far as education goes, like when Abby came to us at the age of 7 and asked to homeschool, I went, like, jeeps, there goes all my goals for next year, like thrown out the bloody window. I wasn't including being a principal and PE teacher and maths teacher all in one. And then like over the experience of them reclaiming their own ability to learn and educate themselves, I realized very quickly I was their biggest limiting factor because of my rigorous paradigms that I had. I went to boarding school. I believe that the girls should have gone to boarding school by the age of 14 to go into a social demographic and have opportunity. I believe they needed the structure of the education system for social intelligence as well as normal intellectual intelligence. I believe that if they want a real step up in life, they needed to have a university degree and everything. And now, crying out loud, in my 10 years of running rites of passage for young men and women, helping them understand that all that is simply a vehicle for you to understand how to live life. My daughters set me up to unearth the capability that was dormant in me to actually be able to help people to do that. So I've learned so much and continually, learn so much from my daughters. And I cherish my relationship with them. I really do.
Mm. Thank you for sharing. I was reflecting on how it was that it came about when we chose to parent differently to how we were raised. And I felt like it started before we were even married. In our actual marriage guidance interview with our priest, the guy that married us was actually James's godfather. So
I knew you were going to bring this up.
and the idea of this interview was to create resonance between ourselves and create a joint vision. And the question was, how many children do you want? And we both wrote 2, but James actually qualified it and said a boy and a girl. And that really started the conversation between us over the years of how we wanted to actually be parents. And we would have conversations about broccoli, and James would say, I'm never going to eat broccoli. And I'm like, what about when you have kids? And he's like, well, they'll eat it and I won't. They'll
Do
do
as
as
I
I
say,
tell
not as I
them
do.
to. And it was in a willingness to, especially on James's part, to question everything that he'd ever learned about how he was raised, to constantly and consciously parent.
I feel so privileged to be able to like be in conversation with the two of you and to receive your stories and your experiences together. I'm curious, you say that, that choice of conscious parenting to some degree started at that age, before you were married. Did you do any courses or any learning around conscious parenting, or was it just a constant self-reflective journey or something else?
It all started when I had post-traumatic stress, depression, and I went suicidal. So, a quick story is Abs was 2. I was in the bathroom. She was having a lot of fun with me, which didn't really happen back then because I was still in the military. I was a high-functioning trauma and depressive individual. So, the military loved me because I threw myself right into work and I was good at it. But they didn't know what was actually going on for me in the background because I did such a good job at masking it. Anyway, Abs is just mucking around and Kirsty yells out dinner time. So I just turned to Abs and I said, gorgeous, just put the toys in the basket. And she did what any 2-year-old having fun with dad would do, and that's just take her time. I just went from 0 to 1,000 degrees Celsius in an instant. I had to get the hell out of the room before I did something that I would really, really regret. And I remember storming past Kirsty and I said to her, yelled at her, and I said, you just go and sort that kid out. I can't. Now, I actually used a bit more like colorful vernacular.
Mhm.
I went and stood in front of the mirror. We had a big full-length mirror in our bedroom at that stage. And I had this conversation with me, which went something along the lines of, dude, who the hell are you? You're not a husband. You're not a father. You're not even a man. You don't know what it is to be a real human. You can take bullets. You can take bombs. You can't even bath your own 2-year-old daughter. And I was exhausted. I was extremely frustrated. I was scared because I was Mr. Fix It. People came to me to fix problems. And my identity was based on that. And so as a father, that's also what I wanted to be seen as. Come to me with your issues. I will fix them for you. I will be your protector. I will always be there for you. I will provide for you, etc., etc. All the old immature archetypes. And they're the only ones that I'd seen. So Kirsty, luckily I had that conversation with myself because I turned around there silhouetted in the doors, the beautiful lady in the middle of the screen for me. And she goes, I can't do this anymore. And she said, we either get you help or the girls and I are going. Because by this stage, Penelope Jane had come onto the world. And so just put everything on the line for me, called it as it was in love. And that's called, in psychological terms, actually called compassionate empathy. It's actually what we would know as tough love. It's like, James, this is the situation I'm seeing it. My boundary is this. And because I was open at that stage, I said, yes, no, I agree. I just don't know what the next step is. I'd really fallen out of my masculine in my life unless it had a uniform on it. And so we then started this journey. Kirsty dragged my ass to an emotional intelligence workshop in the City Masonic Center of all places in front of 300 people. And I was so out of my depth, but I so knew I was at home. And I was like, I had this doubles like personality happening. And that started our journey. Now, the big thing with Kirsty is that she said to me, I will stand beside you as long as you keep taking steps. And I said, gorgeous, I'll always take a step. I just can't guarantee that it'll be forward. And so the two of us were just real and raw and as honest as we possibly could emotionally, because I didn't understand emotions back then. So the commitment was made to the two of us. Now we started that journey together, and that was way, way back in 2008, I think it was, babe. And that then was a speed rocket because I lapped up everything. And Kirsten and I were doing the journey together. It wasn't like the responsibility was on one person because I was broken. No one's ever broken. We're just out of balance. And so we would share, we would bounce off each other. And sometimes that created issues because, we might have had a competitive edge between the two of us. But at the same time, that nature could also be utilized for the betterment. And, we really started to move. So the first journey was not towards the children. The first journey was towards us individually and then as a couple. And I remember we didn't have money for this thing at the time. We had a couple of investment properties, and she goes, we don't have money. I said, "Dude, we've got 2 investment properties." She said, "They're for our future." And I said, gorgeous, if we don't get through this, we ain't got a future. And that's when I knew where I was. I was really dark. And I'd actually decided in and around then to take my own life. But it took 12 months before I was actually going to do it. Girls were mucking around the other day, literally about 2 months ago over a morning tea. And we're talking about times that Kirsty had gone away overseas and that just been dad and the girls' time. And the first time that she ever did it, I was deep in depression and I was suicidal. Kirsty didn't know it at the time. but they're bagging their mother out about leaving them with like a suicidal individual. And I tell this story and I tell it with this emotion for the simple fact that this is where I am now. Back then it was dark. Yeah, cool. But we smile. Why? Because we live and we understand why we live. And we cherish that. We don't discount or disrespect the moments in time that are, but we put them categorically where they belong with the emphasis that they actually require. Nothing more, nothing less. And so, I turned to him and I said, I would not have done it without your mum being there, because that gave me purpose in that moment to be a dad. And you needed me. So that therefore, like I said, gave me purpose. And our journey was like we became individually conscious, then together we became conscious, and that then spilled out into parenting. And back then, conscious parenting was a very new term. Like you couldn't really hear about it. You heard like about conscious relationships a bit, but yeah, we didn't have a mentor that had young people that was living the life that we wanted to live. So Kirsten and I, in the end, one of the things I really look back on, Abby's now 18, Penelope's now 16, this 18 years that we've crafted of this phase of our life, I really look with a lot of humility at what we were able to achieve through just sitting, reflecting, and asking the deep questions between the two of us. And at times we weren't in sync, but at times that actually assisted us sort out the disruption so that when we did sync, it was even more powerful.
And the short answer from all of that amazing background to the story is that we didn't read books about conscious parenting. And even when I was pregnant with Abby, I read one pregnancy book, and that was Kaz Cook's book, which was laced with humor. And I'm so grateful that when Abby's soul chose me, she really helped me. And I spoke about this, I think I spoke about this last in our conversation with Pippa about being a mum, and how consciously choosing to be a mum really helped me to own my creativity. Because when I would look around at mothering and at parenting, there was so much that didn't resonate with me as a mother, and I wanted to raise my daughter in a way that felt good for me. I did a lot of yoga in my pregnancy, and I did a lot of peaceful connection with the baby and things like that. And I'm also grateful that James allowed me to lead him in that, being comfortable in who I am and myself as a mother, and really letting myself take the lead there. And then him trusting me to guide us in a way that was gentle and empowering at the same time. And I think him going away too, like, helped me to really solidify that relationship with my daughter as well, with our daughter as well. And because I was solo parenting essentially for quite a large period. And so I was able to really bring that sense of the beauty way, because that's what it's about for me, is this leading from the heart and parenting in the heart. I was able to bring that into my relationship with Abby. And when James returned, he kind of had to fit into that and allow himself to be led and guided in that. And so there weren't books, and there was simply a willingness for each of us to want to explore. And if I go back with Abby, so I was still learning, and there were a few times when she was little that I smacked her. And whereas time Penelope came into the world, which was 2.5 years later, I had evolved in my parenting, and that was not a choice. It was not a choice to do that, because I understood what that meant for my relationship with her in smacking her. And so despite the fact that James and I used to always say, like, conscious parenting is too hard, don't do it, flippantly, it is a long game. Creatively parenting young people is a long game. But when we allow ourselves to do it, when we allow ourselves to constantly go internally and listen to our heart and interact with our children in that way, it shifts the whole dynamic, and we indirectly and directly communicate this relationship of trust to them, which helps them to feel okay. Just like I felt okay about being a mum, it helps them to feel okay with exploring these parameters for themselves and going beyond what they think is possible for themselves.
I'd just add to that in that, and Chrissy, your question nailed it, because the first step was into myself. I couldn't consciously parent if I'm not conscious of myself. If I don't have emotional literacy, I'm not there for my children in emotional times. Go back to this point I dropped before. The archetypes of the male that I was shown as a young person were the protector and the provider. Instead, they're immature archetypes. I didn't know this at the time, but I actually had in me, I had an innate desire to mature these archetypes from the protector to the space holder. And when Kirst talks about, I remember she had mastitis with Abby, and there was a bit of doubt in her mind. And all my job was there was to be like emotionally present, strong with her, and feel her making the right decision for herself, and to be her champion. Like, you got this. You know what you're doing. Instead of, running to the hospital and getting the drug or whatever. All I had to do, because Kirsty's like naturally a strong woman, but at times, like whenever that faltered, my role was not to take over. My role has been to be more of a space holder and champion. If I've actually jumped over to the takeover, that's been a short-term thing because there's too much disruption there. The big first step was for me to look inside so that, I could actually do those things that are required in simply being present with your kids.
Yeah, I love that. I heard that what you were saying is how important the individual self-reflective healing journey is prior even to understanding conscious parenting. And I totally was just reflecting as you were sharing, when I've always thought about my own childhood, I was lucky enough to have parents who were firstly quite from fairly liberated kind of families. Like, I remember my grandparents, particularly my dad's side, like they were both feminists. They were both ahead of their times. And not so much in my mum's family, but still a very solid family unit with a lot of love and what have you. And when I reflect on my own childhood, I've always said that my parents like went and learned conscious parenting and things like that, which they did do. However, you reminded me that actually what I think probably made the biggest impact was their willingness to go on their own healing journeys. And my mum in particular, her willingness to be in metaphysical learnings and teachings from, I remember potentially from when I was about maybe 6 or something like that. And so her healing, like deep healing journey sort of really kicked off when I was quite little. And just having heard what you're sharing, I think that self-work is probably the biggest impact on us as kids. And then the conscious parenting just gave them tools and techniques with how to interact with us to do it differently to some of the different ways that their parents may have done. And I feel like coming from growing up in a family where that was a real priority has made a huge impact on me, like as an adult and as a teenager. We spoke about this briefly in our first episode as well, about how I was given a lot of choice. I don't ever remember having any control over me. I only ever got grounded once. And it was for a really good reason. It was because I forgot to communicate that I wasn't coming home from school one day, and I got home when it was dark at like 8 p.m. and they were like, "Where the hell have you been?" And I just instantly was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot to tell you that I was going to the movies," And that was the only time I ever remember I never got grounded otherwise. And I mean, I was I wasn't really a big rebel. I wasn't doing lots of naughty things, but at the same time, like that was the type of discipline, if you will, was that there was choice and communication and conversation and all these things. And so I guess off the back of like just all this piece of sharing, I'm curious, of like for the two of you, what and how you disciplined, because I use that word lightly because I know that depending on the philosophy, discipline isn't really the word that gets used. And how do you believe that that has impacted your, now young adults / teenagers?
That's a brilliant, like two brilliant points. Firstly, about discipline, and then secondly, asking for a personalized account. One of the issues that I see in modern parenting, having run rites of passage for over 10 years, which if you wanted your son or daughter on a rite of passage program, you had to sign up for a 1-day parents workshop. And so Kirsten and I, or if I was doing it myself, I'd just come out of the bush and the young ones would be doing their culmination activity on the final day. And we'd take the parents and we'd just have 3 ripe days with them, knowing the ins and outs of their family, which anyone with, is half astute in the conscious realm can actually pick up within half an hour of being with a child. And, we then got to be with the parents and help them to develop an architecture, both personally and as a collegiate, as a family, so that they could then nurture the young person coming back. And so with that, like, discipline often comes up. And what we forget is, and especially, well, both of us are actually ex-military. It took me 17 years to learn my lessons. Kirsty only needed 9. But the point is, like, discipline's actually a heart
Become
function.
ex-military?
Sorry?
Become ex-military? Yeah.
To become ex-military. But discipline's a heart function, not a head function. And this is what we forget. Like, because we're so taught with imposed discipline, which is very left brain and hard and rigid, which therefore then requires a structure of authority external to oneself instead of developing the internal structure, which I know you know about, hence your question. So what I've been massive on with the instruction that I've done out bush with young ones, but just as a dad, like, I won't give them a direct answer. I'll generally ask a question, and that question is there to elicit, what is your passion? What is your biggest desire in this moment? Because if you understand and own your biggest desire, you'll prioritize doing what you need to do to get what you want. And I remember Abs was at 12 and she just comes out of the room and goes, I've been doing a bit of self-parenting. And Kirsten and I just like shot a look at each other going, what? Self-parenting? What? And she's going, yeah, I was lying in bed and I've gone, Abby, you need to get out of bed right now because you got things to do. I know you can spend the rest of the day here, but that's not on the priority list. So you can get out of bed right now and get going. And like Kirsten and I just going, like, because that did not come from my big high five, that didn't come from my bloodline though. That's one cool example. Like, both of them at the moment are out there creating their own stories, and they need stories. And to create the story, they need to know that they're actually able to create the story. So at the age of, I think I was 12 and 14, Kirsten and I were sitting him down and saying, you need to rebel against us. And it's the function of every child. Like, every child must rebel against their parent. Now, the discussion did actually have a bit of context to it, explaining why the rebellion is necessary, which is to find who I am away from the cover of my parents. And so, 6 months later, when Abby's been having a great old right royal rebellion, both passively and actively, I'm driving up the Gold Coast and she's sitting in the car and I'm going, how's that rebellion going for you, Abs? Anyway, 5 minutes of stone silence, in the car, and I'm just chuckling away to myself driving up. And I said to her, just remember what the purpose of the rebellion is. And I said, what is the purpose? And she says, to find myself. So I said, well, then possibly you let go of the fight and you just own who you really are. Your choice. Stay in the fight if you want, or let it go and get to what the point of the fight is. And in warrior speak, there's an old adage, and in the young warrior, like, young people, they really love this energy, and it's great because it's doing energy. It's out there. It's active. We'd always teach them a warrior will walk away from a battle that does not serve winning the war. And so we talk to them about, the arguments that they'd have with mum and dad about little minute things. And they go, yeah, well, what do you actually want? What is it that the big ticket thing that you want? Oh, I want this. Okay. So then why argue about all that small stuff? Why not focus on this big stuff that you want? And you build the trust with mum and dad and you show them that that's truly what you want. Mum and dad will support you. And actually, we don't say mum and dad will support you. We'll ask, will mum and dad support you? Always doing it with questions. And they turn around and say, yeah. If they don't understand how to set self-discipline, if they're not given the latitude to actually understand how to craft their own story.
I I also wanted to add to that in listening to your story about your parents, Carissa, and with your mom and all of the journey that she went on. James used the word humility earlier. And I feel as a parent, humility is so important in creative parenting and conscious parenting, because one thing we've always said is that we will get to a point, and when we allow ourselves to let go, and we let go of needing to be the parent, needing to be the one who's right, who always has the answer, whatever it is, our children will leapfrog from us. And then what happens then is they then give us an opportunity to leapfrog from them. And we continue to evolve in this spiral. Whereas if, as a parent, if we stay stuck in, I need to be the parent and I need to be the one who's got it all under control, we're going to stifle ourselves and our children, because the children, as we all know, from such an early age, learn by watching. They don't learn by us telling them what to do. They learn by watching us. And so if we as parents are living our most creative existence, if we're showing them that we have the self-discipline, that we are doing things that really light us up, our children are going to get the indirect message that it's okay to do things like that. When our daughters were really young, Penelope loved to come in the mornings early because she was an early bird, and she wanted to be with us from really early on. And so it was important for both of us to teach her by our doing that it's okay if she wants to come in and be with us, but to also realize that we're meditating or we're doing yoga or whatever it is that is important for us to start our day. That's how we're starting our day. And then after that, we will give her our full attention. And she will receive the message that, yes, they are present with me when they're with me, and they're also present with themselves. And so it's okay for me to do that as well. And that's how they learn. And yeah, so that the point about humility is so incredibly important. And I think in that homogenization, it's missed. When Penelope went to school, she went to school for 6 months when she was 13 because she just wanted to try it out. And she was struck by the rigidity of the teachers. And when she would question them on something that they said, there were a few teachers who would just shut her down. And the kind of person that she is, she found that quite challenging.
Slight aversion to authority on that one. It's a really good point though, because about Penelope going back to school, because she felt she needed some more structure. So Kirsten and I have always been, we don't mind what decision you make. You just need to give us a deep understanding of your decision-making process, because then what we can do is we can help you with the process so that you get the right decision for yourself. And so she says, I want to go back to school. I'd had a dream about it. As in Penelope had a dream. She saw herself where she wanted to. She'd seen a whole heap of synchronistic things about going back to school. And so she's therefore already demonstrating to us that she's in tune with the universe and she's listening to these things. Cool. So therefore, as a parent, I felt I needed to support that. So I sat down with a pen and paper and I said, talk us through. What are your objectives? She listed 8 objectives about going back to school: educational and continuity, social group. There were both educative and social objectives there. She said, I'll just go for a term and try it out. And I said, no, 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 because Kirsten and I knew commitment was something that she had an issue with. If you're going to go to school, you've got to give it 12 months, because you've got to immerse yourself in it to realize if it's for you or not. Otherwise, the first shaky ground, you'll leave. So if you're going to do this, we'll back you, but you do it for 12 months. And she agreed to that. And I said, therefore, you get cross country, you get NAPLAN, you get everything, because you're choosing that vehicle of education, which is school. It's just if I want to get from Brunswick Heads to Byron Bay, there's many vehicles I can take. I can drive, I can walk, I can get a horse. They're all different vehicles. School is but a vehicle to get educated. And so we explained all this, and she said, yep. She went back after 6 months, besides being completely exhausted, none, zero of her objectives have been met. Her best friend was the librarian because she had an unlimited budget and no one was asking you to buy books except Penelope. And so Penelope would go in there and love the librarian because she said, what about this book series? So the librarian next week would have that whole book series. And the issue with Penelope is that her social group are 30 to 65-year-old women spiritually developed. That is her social group. She's an old soul. And, you know, I could say in my previous level of consciousness, I'd say it would be heartbreaking to watch her struggle to find a social group. No, it's not heartbreaking. I love my daughter, and I've had to watch her go through this level of understanding to realize who she really is. And if she can't connect to people her own age, there's actually a reason for that. And who am I to try and dismiss that? Who am I to try and shield her from that? Because that's all part of her creating her own story. The reason why I didn't kill myself the day I was going to was because 30 years beforehand, I'd been feeding out a mob of Angus cattle with my father. And we're right up the back. And at the back of the property was this big bush block, about 200 acres of incredible bush. And I'd found many artifacts in there. I was afraid of that land because no elder had taken me into country and actually helped me connect to it. And so we just stopped the ute and the Angus cattle are just munching away in their hay. And Dad's gone silent for a moment and he's just zoned into this like bushland. And I'm looking up at him and then he just made this big sweeping gesture with his hand. He said, "There's my God." And I'm like, I'm 8. Like, I'm not spiritually developed enough to have a conversation. But the obvious one is, what do you mean, mate? That's like, God isn't he the guy with white head sitting up on a cloud, etc. That's what they teach me in RE. And all the pictures say that. But I didn't say that. I shut up for a moment. And he then looked me dead in the eyes and he said, "But you got to go and find your own." And the day that I was going to do it, I actually stopped myself because that story, that seed dropped into my head. Now, my father had gone to the other realms, had passed on 13 years before. He was not in the physical realm by then. That seed that he sowed when I was 8 saved my life at 35. And so, you know, Kirsten and I was discussing with one of our daughters about breath work last night. Now, she's heard about breath work through us like for years. But the thing is, we've never forced anything on it. And I know you probably won't hear it, but Penelope's playing the violin currently. And Penelope will tell you we never force the violin on her. And so that's why she practices like sometimes 6 hours a day. And that's why she's getting where she's getting, because she's owning that it's her own passion and she's developing her own internal discipline and procedures to actually to work for that. But Abby's owning breath work because someone else had to tell her. But the thing is, it's always been there. Like, we could take her through sessions if she wanted to. It doesn't matter. She has to earn it on her own. And this is what we forget. We've all got to earn our own life. And, you know, certainly my daughters have helped me remember that. And I'm just grateful that, you know, I've positioned myself in an emotional place where I'm capable of actually assisting them do that.
As I'm listening to you, James, I just wanted to just add a little piece. I'm tuning into the balance between needing to be the one who teaches them all the time and completely giving ourselves away giving them away to the external system to show them what to do. And again, if you go back to the start of this conversation, the way that we come to balance with that is by knowing ourselves and really going internally and asking ourselves, okay, how do I feel about this? Because it's really awesome when those who have chosen us as parents discover something that they've been exposed to for many years from a different perspective. And again, it takes humility to go, oh, you know, I've been trying to tell you that for years. And that's not a helpful message. If we were to say that to her, I've been trying to tell you that message for years, and it's just like, well, this is awesome. It's awesome that you want to explore this. Go ahead. Go and find your own way in that.
That's a really beautiful thing. And I know there are probably a lot of people out there say, well, I don't homeschool my kids. It doesn't matter. All the principles are exactly the same whether or not they go to school or they don't go to school. The principles are exactly the same. And the most influential person in a person's moment is the person who's the most present with them. And what we therefore as parents, that story, that disempowered story as parents. And sure, there comes transitions in lives. Like Kirsten and I had been out doing a young warrior, and we'd left Abby on her own for the first time. She was 14. So she slept in the house on her own. And it was a big thing. We'd set it up, you know, she had the right support around her. But the thing is, in the house, she was on her own. And I remember coming out of the bush and ringing her, and it took me 10 seconds. And I had to do this really quick recalibration. I'm not talking to the same person that I said goodbye to. I'm talking to a new person. And that's the whole point about a rite of passage. And Joseph Campbell's hero's journey articulates so that beautifully. But you never come back to where you were. You never come back to the same tribe, because you're different and so are the tribe. And so in listening to this, all of a sudden the smile came on my face, because it was like, oh my God, like you've just evolved. And I'm really talking to a young woman now. And so like this, I just smiled. I actually told her, I said, gorgeous, I can feel how this experience has been for you. I just want to acknowledge your courage. Like, it's truly amazing. And that's the key thing. Like, all we need to do is be present, witness them. And in the witnessing, if we are truly present and we are connected to ourselves, then if we're meant to support them, or however we're meant to support them, that will actually become self-evident, instead of the left brain kicking in, over analyzing everything, you know, going to risk management, which I know a lot of parents are amazing at. But actually, that doesn't necessarily help another person write their own story. Probably, if can you entertain one more story? Like about 6 months ago, Abby gives me, I'm actually on a Zoom call and with some friends, and Abby rang. And normally, you know, I wouldn't answer the phone, but I turned and I said, Abs has just rung and I've got a feeling to answer. Please excuse me for a moment. Answer the phone call. Dad, just been in a car accident. The car's currently on its side on the edge of the road. And I said, right, location, asked a couple of key questions. I was on the phone call for no more than a minute. Get off the phone. I'm good in that situation. You know, I just know what to do. So I quickly told my friends, listen, I've got to go. As been an accident. Last words to Abby was, I'll ring you in 10 minutes when I'm on the road. So I grabbed Kirst. Kirst drove. We're driving towards the incident site, which was 20 minutes away from our property. And when we get into reception, I give Abby a call. Now, by this time, in 10 minutes, a person had turned up with a winch and had righted the car. A mechanic had turned up with a jack that actually was helping her straight away fix it. It was a boyfriend's car. A boyfriend was sending help on the way to also help with the situation. When I got off that phone call, I knew that if that situation had happened on the other side of the world, she's got life. She's amazing. I'm so intensely loving of the person, the capability that she's got. And she doesn't need me in her life, which is truly amazing. And I'm just honored that she wants me in her life. And that's therefore the job that as my role now as a person, not just a parent, is to play that role of being there as the person who's required, as opposed to the person who needs to be there for fulfilling the actual role that I have in life of being a father. I've had conversations with my daughters from a very early age. If I die today, because Death and I, we've known each other very, very intimately for most of my life. If I die today, you've got life. You don't need me in your life. And I think I know actually the two of them have really taken that whole thing and they're running with it. And they know that.
Thanks for sharing. It's really powerful. I feel like that impactation of you don't need me is so empowering. And I feel like there's so many adults cruising around who do feel like they still need their parents. And it's such an impact from the parent who gets such a kick out of someone needing them. There's such a self-fulfilling, unconscious creation of getting my own needs met through my child to create like this sense of like, I'm important and I'm needed. And I feel like that what you've done by sharing that with your kids is why they have this ability and capacity to look after themselves, because that is the truth, you know, and that is the God flowing through them in their capacity to create their realities without this sense, consciously or unconsciously, that they need someone or something else to manage, to discipline, to parent, to etc. And I love that you brought forward that your other daughter had said about the self-parenting. That was so great. It was Penny, right? Penny, who said it?
That was Abby.
Oh, that was
Penny
Abby.
tries to emulate the self-parenting to varying degrees of success.
Yes, so funny. There's a few things that I wanted to speak to, because you shared about how it's irrelevant as to whether the kid goes to school or has homeschooling. And I was thinking that before you said it, because I went through the schooling system and I was at home receiving different types of messaging to what the school system was sharing with me. And I remember this one time in primary school when I was in about grade 5, I think, and my teacher was on this rant about how you absolutely should not love yourself, because basically that was arrogant and stuck up. And I put my hand up and I'm like, my mum tells me that you definitely meant to love yourself. And she, oh my gosh, she was so triggered. And I just remember being like, nah, I'm not taking any of this on board. And I was just like, I'm going to, and this is when I was, what, grade 5? Would I have been 11?
Yeah. 10 or 11.
Yeah. And so, you know, that was the messaging that I was receiving at home, which was like, and I consciously recall being able to recognize this particular teacher's insecurities. I remember watching her with the boys in our class, knowing at that age that she was getting her needs met through them, through favoring the boys. And I could see this relationship that she had with this other teacher. And I remember a male teacher, and thinking, this woman is getting all of her validation through these men and through these boys and the teacher. And to have that level of awareness, it didn't matter if I was at school or somewhere else, just like what you said. And I was doing my own little human experiment, Boz being at school, by watching people in their unconscious creation of their reality. I think I might have shared this on the first episode about how I was always given choice. And one of the choices that I had was like, when I went from primary school to high school, which school do you want to go to? And there was no influence. It was make the choice. And something else that you said earlier, James, made me remember that one of the most empowering and simultaneously annoying things that my parents used to do would just never give me an answer. It was always met with a question. And, you know, most of the time that was really great, really empowering, but sometimes I just want them to tell me what to do, because that would have felt so much easier in that moment. I remember this one time of asking mum if she thought that I should stay together with my boyfriend. And I must have been probably 19 or 20 at the time. And it wasn't like, I mean, I was deeply and madly in love with this very young man. And I also knew that he was not good for me in any like long-term sense of it was great fun for what it was, but I knew he wasn't going to be a long-term situation for me, even though I loved him deeply. And my mum just said, this is something you need to work out for yourself. Like, you can't, I'm not going to give you the answer. And I could, in that moment, I could tell what she thought, and I knew what she probably wasn't telling me. And I also had to come up with the answer on my own. I remember after primary school, I went to a Catholic primary school, and we went to like church most Sundays throughout my primary school. And at the end of school, mum and dad said to me, now, we gave you an opportunity to go to a Catholic primary school so that you had a foundation to choose from. However, your father and I, or your mother and I, aren't really neither here nor there about the religious sense of things. And we want you to know that you can take what you've learned or you can leave it. And it's up to you to decide what your relationship is with God, with the divine, with spirit, whatever you want to have. And again, this level of empowerment for a 12-year-old to be like, wow, okay, cool. And so it meant that I never felt indoctrinated by what I was learning, because I always knew that I had a choice. Coming home gave me always the support and empowerment to mean that I could create my own decisions around reality. And again, at the end of high school, most of my friends were being very much encouraged to go to university straight out of school. And my parents were like, unless you know exactly what you want to do and you're 100% sure, like, we don't want you to go. So go and get a job and go and travel, do whatever you want to do. And I am so glad that they encouraged that. It wasn't just a, you've got the choice. It was like, we encourage you if you're not ready to go and do something else. Because what that meant for me was that I didn't go and study hospitality. Thank Christ for that. Because I'm sure my 18-year-old self would have thought that was great. My 39-year-old self would have thought that was a total waste of time based on what I do right now. And I got to go and actually live in hospitality as a work, that was my job as a young person. And I got to learn on the job, and I was in management positions and all the different things. And so I got, I think, more learning than I probably ever would have got at university, just through my life skills, through that job. And what it meant was that when I was 27 years old, I decided to go and study what I actually really wanted to study. And there was no shame. My mum went to study when she was, I think she completed her studies of naturopathy when she was 40. So she probably started when she was maybe 37. And so for me, going back to study at 27, I was like, great, there's no shame in this, because my parents did it. And like you said, my parents having their own businesses, following what excited them. My mum studying massage and naturopathy when she was 35 to 37, somewhere in there, meant that I was led by individuals that were doing things that were not the normal. Every single other one of my friends' parents, like, pretty much worked typical 9-to-5 jobs and, did the fairly stock standard kind of a thing. Through that influence, I learned Reiki when I was 8. I went to meditation long weekends when I was 12, and learned how to connect with different elements of consciousness of nature. And I remember wanting to go and do that. It was probably presented to me, but I was like, yeah, this sounds great. It wasn't forced upon me. And that set a really great journey for me in my own self-empowerment for energetics. And also it created a total foundation for what I do right now, which is spending all of my time talking about metaphysics and exploration and consciousness and creation and all of the different things. And so I totally agree with the pieces that you shared, coming from the other side, like coming from the having received it. I don't have kids, and so I haven't had the opportunity to practice what I think I would and how I think I would parent, but I have received that type of messaging that you guys have spoken to from a fairly young age. We talked about homogenization and differentiation, and my reality, whilst I did go to the school system, I did do fairly typical style things, I still got to live out a differentiated experience.
Yeah.
And was encouraged that through the styles that you guys have been talking about.
I also love that your parents were parenting that way, because it is, again, the conscious creative parenting is an evolution of parents feeling okay about parenting that way. Like, it's so empowering for us as young people to be given a choice. But for your parents to have parented you in that way would have been even more uncommon than it was for James and I when we parented our children that way. And so the ability to be able to share these types of things and to share the outcomes of the breaking out of that homogenization is so powerful, and is a big permission slip for people that are looking at this, the system and going, there's got to be a different way, because so many parents also feel powerless to creatively parent their children. They believe that they have to do it a certain way. And the reality is that the only way that we have to do it is the way that we feel guided to, and that our children want to be parented, and we let them guide us. So yeah, thanks for sharing all of that.
I was doing a young warrior a few years ago for Queensland Rugby League, and day 3, we'd just done this really intense reflective mirror exercise and deep into anger and outrage. And I witnessed this 15-year-old own his self-sabotage, his destructive behavior to this huge level. And like, I was in awe of him. Now, he was just about to be expelled from his 3rd high school. And I'm looking at him going, you literally are incredible. Anyway, so it was lunchtime, and they asked asked a few questions, and so we kept talking. I said, well, if you guys want lunch, someone's got to do something about it. And the whole point is, on those camps, if you want something, you got to take action to actually get it. So anyway, he comes over and he's helped me get some lunch ready. And he goes, hey, Cheese, what do you? Cheese is my nickname. It's my inner child now. Before, it was my act that I hid behind, and I had to let him go so that he would actually come back in his mature state, which is my actual inner child. He doesn't belong in the boardroom, he belongs in the playground. But if I'm spending too much time in the boardroom, he knocks the hell out of the door saying, get the hell out of there, come in the playground. So he goes, Cheese, what do you do for coin? No, so what do you do for a living? I said, what do you mean, mate? He says, what do you do for coin? And I just put my arms out like this. And I looked around, and he's just going, no. I said, why do you say that? And he says, my granddad's an electrician. My dad's an electrician. I've been told I'm to be an electrician. Now, in that moment, the seed that was just dropped by nothing but putting my arms out and being who I am was that all of a sudden the door of possibility just opened for this young man. Now, interestingly enough, he went back and got the crap beaten out of him by his dad. And that almost made me just like put a cessation to the Young Warrior program, because I could not be involved in a program which would empower youth to be in harm's way within their own families. And that's what actually birthed the parents workshop. And so literally, when I'd come out of the bush and know that the men have anger, I'd go broadside straight away. And I would literally get them to understand that if they don't own their anger, then this is actually what's happening, X, Y, and Z. But the thing is, no one had told these dads about it, and the dads didn't know any other way. So what we're doing is providing another way. But the fascinating thing about that workshop is there was another guy, and one of the dads who I thought was actually more inclined to using the knuckle corners me behind the ute after the little chat that we had, and you could tell that I'd affronted him by calling out anger and everything. And he's started to go into a story of justification, but I could tell it was actually like a veil, like it was loose, it was thin. And I just said to him, mate, instead of constantly asking him questions, in which if you were constantly asked questions, how did you feel? And he said, I'd feel interrogated, because that's what mum and dad were doing. They were just trying to ask me questions just to prove that I was wrong and they were right. I said, yeah, cool. So he's going to shut down. Is that what he's doing? He's shutting down. And he says, yeah, that's what he's doing. I said, well, possibly you just share a story. You share a bit of yourself first, and have no expectation that he's going to fill the gap after that story, but just see what happens. Anyway, one of the most moving things that I got in feedback wise was about 3 weeks later from that guy who sent me a specific email saying, me and my son have just come back from the bottom of the driveway, and I did what you said, and we were 3 hours down there. And that's like, so there's like chalk and cheese in fathers. One's open, one's not. But even still, as you say, it's understanding that, well, the deeper you go into all the healing and you understand generational wounds and everything like the bloodlines and stuff like that, you sort of understand why we're led down certain paths. And there's nothing, when you become conscious about it, you realize there's no right and wrong. It's just the vehicle in life that we're choosing at that particular time to actually go through our soul purpose. But the more we can help our children understand that they can create from day dot in a way in which remember, formless needs form to flow. And that's where a lot of people at the moment are getting a bit caught up. They just don't have any boundaries. They're letting their kids run riot. but at the same time, they helicopter parent, and they've got it's just the poles in the pendulum, the law of polarity. And when they get through those own personal woundings to come to that point that Kirsty was just alluding to, that point of knowing at the top, that's when, they set the foundation, the container. Because remember, Neo doesn't just go into the Matrix. Morpheus takes him into the training matrix and beats the shit out of him in a safe environment first. So Neo owns his own power and realizes that he can actually step up, that he is more. But Morpheus beats the crap out of him. And that's what we forget. I have to earn my right to step into the real world. And that's natural. If I don't earn my right to step into the real world, I don't have a grounded sense of self-confidence, knowing that what I have is of value. And my tribe doesn't actually know where I'm at either. So there's this big grey void, which we currently have in society currently.
Mm. One little thing that I wanted to add there that just came up then when you were speaking was the sense of judgment. And we're constantly judging. We're almost even being encouraged to judge other parents for the way that they're parenting, and we're also judging ourselves. And so we're afraid of getting it wrong, which is again stifling our children. And if we were to come to a place to go back into ourselves and do our own work so that we know we have a choice, which means that we impart that knowledge to our children that they have a choice, then we get to be with them in all of the messiness. We get to feel okay about sharing our stories with them. We get to feel okay about crying in front of them, and all of the things that we believe that are wrong because of the way we were raised. And I'm simply talking about our generation, like mine and James's generation, and how we were raised by our parents, who were essentially baby boomers. The more that we come into connection with self, the more that we are able to give that message to our children, and then they know and they can take it from there and evolve, as you've demonstrated, Carissa, in what you've shared about parenting as well. So humility is so important, and giving ourselves the opportunity to really know that we have a choice and that we don't have to judge ourselves for doing something different to the way that it's supposed to be done.
Well, humility comes from the etymology of the word is from humus, which actually means to ground, which is so pivotal, babe, in what you're saying. Like, if we can at least allow our children to understand what it is to be grounded in this world, then that gives them the opportunity to bring the maximum energy forward for the betterment of everyone.
Well, thank you for this conversation today. Feel as though there's been lots of little pieces, and I trust that anyone who's a parent that's listening, or who's wanting to be a parent, or who looks and thinks, I wish I could have done it differently, it's never too late to start. Never too late.
Can I back that, babe? That's one of the biggest messages I get from, out there speaking and being with people is dads turning around and saying, "Man, I've just blown it." No, I just want to really reiterate what you just said. It's never too late. Matter of fact, the more you wake up, especially, in their pivotal years, the more you demonstrate what Carissa mentioned before about it's okay to learn in all aspects, which therefore means it will set them up for a learning, therefore growing life. And I think it's never too late. Don't use that's just a story of justification to stay stuck and wound yourself and remain a victim. Realize that you can, by empowering yourself, you empower the family unit. And you probably realize, I don't mind crying. I saw my father cry twice in his life. I saw a tear roll down his cheek when he took the funeral of his mother, and it was one tear. And then I saw him cry when the dog died. They're the only two times I saw my old man cry. And my daughters know that I'm quite willing and able to sit in their presence and express whatever emotion I need to. So it's never too late. Matter of fact, if you go on this journey with them, you can bond so much closer than you've ever thought you could.
Yeah, I love that. I often think about how, if my parents really started doing the self-reflective healing / conscious parenting kind of work from my memory when I was like 6 or 7. And there is so much, you know, psychology around our first formative years of the 1 to 7 and the development of our psyche. And whilst no doubt there were mistakes made during that time, the repair that would have happened through the later than that time is significantly impactful. And I believe that even if that had never happened, and now as an adult, my parents chose to like do their own self-healing and like relate with me in a different way, I believe that would still have a serious impact on the reparenting of my inner child, to have open conversations and repair, whether it be in conversation consciously or just through the quantum field, through the impactation that happens when we do healing, and how that impacts our generational lines, both forward and backwards. And so I love that piece around it's never too late. I feel like that is so true across the board, and it feels like it kind of answers a bit of a question for me of like,
Really appreciative that you were able to share with us and that we were able to receive from you. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
thank you. And thanks for sharing your stories and your willingness and your emotional capacity, because I think it's something really beautiful for people to receive. So thank you.
Thank you.